Daytona, it's a name that instantly brings to mind the roaring V8 bank turns and the high-speed theater of American stock car racing. But what if I told you that in the early 1960s, Formula One the elite, finely tuned world of European open-wheel racing briefly collided with Daytona's raw speed and oval glory? Yes, in one of the most unusual footnotes in racing history, Formula One cars were tested on the banks of Daytona, and for a moment, the worlds of finesse and brute force nearly merged. Let's rewind to the early 1960s. Formula One was growing, still a young championship, but already legendary. Great names like Jim Clark, Graham Hill, and John Surtees were shaping the sport. Most races were held in Europe, on twisty road circuits and historic city layouts, but F1's organizers had a dream, expanding into the United States. America, however, was a different beast. The fans loved speed. They wanted sound, spectacle, and tracks that were nothing like Monza or Monaco, and the ultimate cathedral of speed, Daytona International Speedway. Daytona had opened in 1959, just a few years earlier. Built for stock cars, it featured massive 31-degree bank turns and long straights. NASCAR had made it famous, but Daytona wasn't only for oval racing, it had a road course too, and that's where F1's brief flirtation with the American South began. In 1962, the legendary Colin Chapman, founder of Lotus, brought over his team's newest innovation, the Lotus 25. It was a car that would go on to dominate Formula One, with a fully monocoque chassis and a lightweight design that stunned the racing world. And at the wheel was none other than Jim Clark, perhaps the greatest driver of his generation. Their mission? Test the car on Daytona's road course, a hybrid circuit that used parts of the oval and an infield section. It was an unofficial test, more of a demonstration really, but it sparked real curiosity on both sides of the Atlantic. Could Formula One cars, with their low weight, high cornering grip, and nimble behavior, survive the extreme speeds and loads of a NASCAR-style layout? The answer came quickly. It was possible, but just barely. Clark's Lotus hit speeds upwards of 170 miles per hour on the banking, unheard of for F1 cars at the time. The straights were no problem, but the banking, that was something else entirely. Formula One cars weren't built for that kind of sustained lateral force. Their suspension geometry, tires, and even chassis structure weren't designed for steep, high-speed corners like Daytona's. Jim Clark, always the consummate professional, gave the track his full effort, but after the run, he reportedly described the experience as unsettling. The Lotus was fast but fragile. The suspension creaked, tires were down faster than expected. It was like trying to sprint across a tightrope with a hurricane at your back. And there was another problem. Daytona was built for crashes. NASCAR cars could withstand high-speed impacts. F1 cars, on the other hand, were essentially paper-thin compared to stock cars. A mechanical failure or tire blowout on the banking could have been deadly. The test wasn't publicized heavily, and it wasn't part of any official Formula One calendar planning. But for a moment, it raised a big question. Could F1 truly break into the American mainstream by embracing its style of racing? Back in Europe, F1 was undergoing its own evolution. The Lotus 25 would go on to win the World Championship in 1963. Jim Clark would cement himself as one of the sport's greatest icons, but Daytona, it faded from the F1 conversation just as quickly as it had entered. Instead, Formula One focused on road courses like Watkins Glen in New York, which became the official home of the U.S. Grand Prix. It was a safer choice, more in line with F1's DNA, tight corners, elevation changes, and technical driving. The spectacle of Daytona was simply too risky, too different, too American. But the legacy of that 1962 test session remains. It showed what could have been a fusion of two racing philosophies, and in many ways, it foreshadowed the sport's future. Today, F1 is global. It races in Miami and Las Vegas. It's faster, louder, more dramatic than ever. And while it never returned to Daytona, that one test stands as a symbol of the sport's ambition. Imagine, for just a second, an F1 Grand Prix held under the Florida sun, with open-wheel cars flying down the banking, engines howling against the concrete walls. It's an alternate history that never happened, but it came close. So next time you hear the name Daytona, don't just think NASCAR. Think about Jim Clark, the Lotus 25, and the moment Formula One dared to dance with America's fastest track. Because for one brief moment in the 1960s, Formula One and Daytona nearly became something unforgettable.